There was a time when the United States and South Africa stood on the same side of history, when hope was stronger than suspicion, and when the end of apartheid felt like a miracle not only for South Africans, but for the entire world. Back then, America celebrated South Africa's freedom as a victory for human dignity, democracy, and justice. Nelson Mandela was welcomed as a global hero, and Washington spoke of partnership, trade, and rebuilding a nation that had suffered for generations. It felt like the beginning of a powerful friendship, one built on shared values and shared dreams. But today, that friendship is shaking, and many are asking a painful question. How did we get here? To understand why the relationship between the United States and South Africa now feels like it is standing at the edge of collapse, we must go back, far beyond today's politics, beyond military exercises and angry statements, back to the deep emotional scars of history, to the struggles that shaped South Africa's identity and the choices that now define its future. For decades, apartheid isolated South Africa from much of the world. The United States, like many Western nations, had complicated and often shameful relationships with the apartheid government. Economic interests and Cold War fears sometimes outweighed moral responsibility. Yet, global pressure grew, and eventually, apartheid fell. When it did, South Africa did not just become a free nation. It became a symbol of reconciliation, forgiveness, and peaceful transition. The world believed South Africa would become a bridge between the global South and the Western powers. And for a long time, it tried. In the early years of democracy, South Africa built strong ties with the United States and Europe, while also supporting African unity and global cooperation. It spoke the language of human rights, multilateralism, and diplomacy. Trade increased. American companies invested. Students exchanged ideas. There was optimism that South Africa would become a stable democratic anchor for the continent. But history does not move in straight lines. And slowly, quietly, tensions began to grow. South Africa never forgot who supported it during its darkest years. Countries like Russia and China had backed the liberation movements when Western governments hesitated. That memory matters deeply in South African politics. Gratitude became loyalty, and loyalty began to shape foreign policy. Over time, South Africa leaned more toward alliances that emphasized resistance to Western dominance, economic independence, and what leaders called strategic non-alignment. But to Washington, it didn't look like non-alignment anymore. It looked like a shift. China became South Africa's largest trading partner. Russia became a political ally. Iran, heavily sanctioned and isolated by the West, found friendly doors in Pretoria. And South Africa joined BRICS, not just as an economic group, but as a statement that the world no longer belongs to the West alone. From South Africa's point of view, this was about sovereignty, dignity, and refusing to be dictated to by powerful nations. From America's point of view, it was starting to look like South Africa was choosing sides. And then came the military cooperation, joint naval drills with Russia, then with China, then with Iran. To many in Washington, this was no longer neutral diplomacy. This was active partnership with countries the United States openly calls adversaries. Countries under heavy sanctions, countries accused of human rights abuses, regional destabilization, and war. And suddenly, words became harsher. When powerful U.S. lawmakers began calling South Africa an adversary, it was more than just political language. It was a warning. It was Washington saying, "We are no longer sure you are with us." For South Africans, those words were shocking and painful. How could the country that once praised Mandela now speak of hostility? How could cooperation turn into condemnation so fast? But from America's side, frustration had been building for years. South Africa refused to condemn Russia strongly over the war in Ukraine. It chose diplomatic language instead of taking sides. It accused Western nations of double standards, pointing to wars in the Middle East and Africa that received less global outrage. It emphasized dialogue, not punishment. To South Africa, this was moral consistency. To America, it felt like betrayal. And now, with Iranian warships entering South African waters for joint exercises, the tension has reached a boiling point. For Americans watching protests being crushed in Iran, seeing their ally hosting Iranian military vessels feels like a slap in the face. It looks like indifference to suffering, looks like choosing politics over people. And in politics, perception is everything. At the same time, trade hangs in the balance. For years, South Africa has benefited from special trade access to the US market under programs designed to help African economies grow. Thousands of jobs depend on it. Entire industries depend on it. But now, voices in Washington are calling for South Africa to be punished economically for its foreign policy choices. This is where geopolitics becomes personal. Because when trade deals collapse, it is not politicians who lose first. It is factory workers, farmers, small business owners, young people searching for opportunity, families trying to survive rising prices and unemployment. South Africa is already battling deep inequality, energy crises, corruption scandals, and youth unemployment that feels like a ticking time bomb. Losing economic partnerships would not just be a diplomatic loss, it would be a social earthquake. And yet, many South Africans feel tired of being told who they can and cannot be friends with. They remember colonialism, they remember exploitation, they remember being treated as pawns in global power games. And they do not want to return to a world where powerful nations decide their future behind closed doors. So now South Africa stands at a dangerous crossroads. On one side, powerful Western economies that still control global finance, trade systems, and major investment flows. On the other side, emerging powers promising a new world order, one less dominated by Washington and Europe, one where Africa might finally negotiate as an equal partner. But choosing between them is not simple, because geopolitics is not just about ideology, it is about money, security, survival, and influence. And when major powers clash, smaller nations often pay the highest price. The tragedy is that this crisis is not happening in isolation. It is happening in a world already on edge. Wars in Europe, conflicts in the Middle East, rising competition between superpowers, trade wars, cyber wars, influence wars. Every nation is being forced to pick strategic positions, whether they want to or not. Neutrality is becoming harder to defend. And South Africa, with its history of resistance and independence, is determined not to be pushed. But the United States is also determined not to tolerate what it sees as alignment with its enemies. So both sides are hardening their positions. And when diplomacy becomes emotional, when pride enters foreign policy, compromise becomes difficult. This is no longer just about naval drills or trade agreements. This is about identity, about who South Africa believes it is in the world, and about whether the United States is willing to accept a partner that refuses to follow its lead. History shows that alliances do not usually collapse overnight. They erode slowly, through mistrust, through misunderstandings, through accumulating grievances that are never fully addressed. And right now, that erosion is clearly visible. If this path continues, the consequences could reshape not only South Africa's economy, but its global standing. It could shift Africa's geopolitical center of gravity. It could encourage other nations to openly defy Western pressure. And it could accelerate the birth of a more divided world, where cooperation gives way to blocs and rival camps. But it could also push South Africa into dangerous isolation, where promises of alternative partnerships fail to replace lost Western investment and access. History is filled with countries that believed new alliances would protect them, only to discover too late that power politics has no permanent friends, only permanent interests. And the question now is whether both Washington and Pretoria remember what originally brought them together. Not just trade and security, but shared belief in dignity, justice, and peaceful change. Because once trust is broken between nations, rebuilding it is far harder than destroying it. And right now, trust is running out.